Hey everybody, welcome to my art desk. You'll be spending a lot of time here. Today I have a pretty simple video for us. I have a sketch that I started a while ago that I hadn't gotten around to finishing. I am currently in quarantine, so I have a decent amount of sketches that you're probably going to see me color quite a few of them in the next coming weeks, just because honestly I have nothing else to do. So I figure it's a great time to catch up on some art, great time to get some new things out there. Outside of just this one piece and all of the sketches that I'm going to be finishing, I will hopefully also be recording some videos about my sketching process and the process of taking a piece from the ground to the top. So you'll get to see the sketching process, the designing process, because I was planning on doing some original characters in that time as well. That way you can really get a sense of my design process, not just my recreation process. But you'll also get to see that because I'll definitely be doing some fan art over this week as well. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. But as far as today's video, I have a Darth Vader piece that I started while I was on vacation right here. You can see it's just a pencil sketch right now. A lot of unfinished lines, even some notes up here at the top. But today we're going to go ahead and refine that, and we're going to put the final colors in it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and outline the whole thing with a Pigma Micron pen, using various different line weights just to sort of add dimension and some weight to everything. And then from there I will continue on to the Copic markers to really get in some nice detail shading and colors as a base layer and some highlight layers. And as far as the backgrounds, we might play around with a couple different mediums to really get that solid. But yeah, so like I said, you'll get to watch the whole thing live. As far as what I'm doing, it won't actually be live, but you'll get to watch the whole process happen while I'm doing it. So I'll leave notes occasionally as I'm going through, but for the most part, it'll just be a nice little time lapse for you, and we'll check in after it's inked, and I'll give you a little rough rundown on the coloring process, and then we'll wrap this baby up and call it a day. So yeah, let's get to it. Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off with the Micron pens, like I was saying before. The key thing here is that I got 3 different thicknesses of pens here, and the most important thing to me when inking is to make sure that you vary your line weight. This helps draw focus to certain areas of the piece. It also helps get some of the finer details with a finer line so that they're bold, but they're not overly thick, so you can keep some of those small details nice and as small as you have them in your original sketch, because obviously doing fine detailing with a Sharpie wouldn't do you too much good. So I find that it's important to have the varied line weight. It also helps to, in my opinion, add perspective to a piece. So in this particular case, you'll see that I'm about to start outlining the hand in a thicker outline. And I find that this helps, like I said, to really pull this piece, or the hand rather, outside of the piece, and it really helps put it in the perspective that I originally intended it to be. So I find that the thicker lines also help with that. So, and again, I like to also do the thicker lines for the silhouette, as I find that it helps the character stand out from the background a little bit more. It also defines what the character is. I find that that's especially nice with a character like Vader, where you have the flowing cape. A lot of times you can find that in an art piece, some of those details can get lost in the piece if they aren't properly colored or defined, and I just find that the thicker, bold outline is something that helps prevent this from happening as often. That's not to say that it won't ever blend into a background if you do a bold background, and sometimes you do want your character details to blend into the background a little bit better, but I find a lot of times when you're looking to get that bold character standing in front of a bold background, it helps to really separate the two and define your borders. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm just going in and inking, adding varied line weights to different parts. So you'll see some of the finer mechanics in the legs. I'm going to go in after outlining and really start to just get some of those details in there, some of the slotting and some of the grooves. So a lot of those smaller details are really nice for the more intricate details that you would find, especially in robotics. A lot of robotic characters have all of these intricate details. So you might not have that so much in your G1 transformer, but when you get to your Michael Bay transformers, should you decide to draw them, you shouldn't, but should you decide to draw them, you can really start to get some of those finer details in there with things like that. But yeah, so even in a situation like that though, very, very important to have line weight in it, as it'll really just bring more dimension to your piece, and ultimately that's what you're looking for. So I'll quit rambling. I'm gonna go ahead and let the rest of this play through, and then we'll see you on the flip side. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the inking done, so that's all ready for color. And basically what we're going to do for the color is I'm going to start out with the base tones in Copic, and then we can go ahead and layer over that with different shades and colors of Copics until we get a nice blend that we're looking for. And that is the really, really, really nice thing about Copic markers, is that they blend super well and get a super vibrant, rich saturation. So we're going to start with Vader, and then we're going to move on to the background. Now I have already pre-planned out what the background is going to be, and there's going to be kind of this green hazy sky. So a lot of the lighting on Vader is going to be greens and grays, which I think will really bring some color into his suit, where he's generally a very monotone colored character. So I think that'll really help to bring a little bit more color to this piece, both through the background, but it'll also bleed over into Vader, which I think will be something that'll be kind of unique. Pardon me. So that's what we're going to do for that. I'm going to go ahead and grab the markers. We'll go ahead and dive in. Obviously, you'll get to see everything, but we're going to be starting out just kind of hitting into the suit. So we're going to start out probably with the helmet, hit all of the suit, get him detailed first, then I'll move on to the background. I'll ink it, color it, move forward with that, and then we can add in some finalized lighting effects, highlights, all that fun stuff. So getting ready to do that right now. Alrighty, kicking things off with the colors, we're starting out with some alcohol-based markers here. I previously said Copics, but these are actually Artist Loft markers by Michaels. They're basically just a Copic knockoff, so they work pretty well. Can't really complain too much about anything. I have a couple notes, but I'll get into that in a second here. First thing to note is that with alcohol markers, the key is in layering. So it's imperative to have a nice base layer that you can then bulk up with your lighting and your shading and some of your highlights and mid-tones. So I think for this I used about 4 markers for just about all of the black, and what's really exciting about that, to me at least, is that with the same 4 markers you can really get some differences in material and texture. You'll see that the helmet is the same 4 markers as the cape and as some of the other armor pieces, as well as some pieces that I tried to get a little bit more leathery. So again, with the same 4 markers, you can really find a lot of different variety, which is something that really I find exciting. So with the same 4 markers, and then obviously on top of that I have some of the lighting, such as the green markers that are used here for the helmet and for the neck armor, but for the most part almost all of Vader was done with the same 4 markers, which was something that I didn't know if I would need more markers starting out, but as it went on I had no problem blending out the colors and layering them to get very distinct and differential textures and finishes. So that's what I'm doing right here. You can see I'm getting into the sleeve at this point, which was supposed to be a little bit more of a leathery finish. So you can see just really making sure that I added in those wrinkles, and then again going back in with the lighter marker to blend out the darker ones. This is something that really gets that smooth transition, but you don't want to cover your lights too much, otherwise you lose your highlight tone. And this is something that I struggled with for a long time, was once I had my base layer down, I liked to shade it to the point that the base layer was really non-existent. So making sure that you have a nice balance in your shade to highlight is something that's very important for contrast and for interest in your piece. So that's something that I definitely try to keep up with in all of my pieces, but especially this piece where you have a character that has essentially one color that you're working with the entire piece for costuming. It's important to make sure that you're keeping that balance in there. Otherwise, it ends up kind of looking like a muddy mess. So, obviously trying to avoid the muddy mess as much as we can, which is why blending and having a couple different tones in there is something that I find important. As you can see, I'm about to start adding in the green highlight on the neck armor, and I was actually really happy with how this turned out. I went in with a base of a lime green and then blended it out with a colorless blender. This really pushes it into the back of the armor to look more like a reflection rather than a hard light, which is something that's important where the green light is coming from the sky and it's not going to be as harsh of a light as, say, a lightsaber, where it casts a definitive shadow, or rather highlight, onto the armor that would be extremely visible. It just helps kind of smooth it out and push it back just a little bit, which is really nice. Same thing with the cape here, kind of the opposite end of that spectrum. Same 4 markers that I was using for everything else, just going in with that base of a neutral gray. I believe I started with the 6 on this one because I wanted to make sure that the cape was really dark and really sat behind him. I then went in with the neutral gray 8 to add some first initial shadows, and then for the inside of the cape where it was folded over, I went back in with a black marker to really add some heavy shadows in there. So you can see how that kind of blended out to get a nice smooth transition. I then returned to the suit to continue working on some of those details, and now you can see the more stark contrast between the cape and the basic suit. So again, currently working on the leathery material on the inside of the robes, and beginning to work on the box on his chest. I was very careful not to shade the box too much, as I really wanted that detail to stand out, and it was something that I felt could get lost very easily in the center of his chest, where it is surrounded by very similar colors. I wanted to make sure to leave a bit of a rim around that of highlight to make sure that it was noticeable in the piece. Funny enough, about this point in the process was when my neutral gray 3 marker started to die on me. So this is me panicking and trying to get all of the details that I needed with the neutral gray 3 drawn in, so that if that marker did die, I had at least the base tones for everything I needed done. This wouldn't have been too big of a concern, except for 1, I was in the middle of filming, 2, I'm in quarantine, so naturally I can't really easily go out to buy a marker replacement as I normally would, but also with alcohol markers, a lot of it is time sensitive and blending quickly before the ink sets, especially on where I'm using Bristol board as a paper. It doesn't absorb the marker as well as certain things like blending card do, where they really accept the marker well and blend well. Bristol sometimes has a little bit of trouble where it likes to soak up a little bit too much of the ink and it's already dry before you can really blend with it. So you kind of have to work a little bit quick with Bristol to make sure that you can get everything blended the way that you need it to. So that's what I'm doing right here. Like I said, the neutral gray 3 at this point wasn't super handy for anything but some blending in of some of the other tones, which at this stage it still worked just fine for that. However, I knew that this was the end of that marker as far as any major filling goes. And like I was saying earlier about some of the gripes about alcohol markers, that is maybe the biggest gripe that myself and probably many others have, is that a lot of alcohol markers tend to run past their prime very, very quickly. It doesn't take too many art pieces before they start to run thin on you. And you can use them for blending and such, but for heavy saturation. You really have to work at it, and obviously the more you work at it, the more ink it drains, and so you end up into another marker very, very quick, which obviously for cost reasons isn't always the most effective. But again, for the finalized piece that you get, you just really can't argue with the results that alcohol markers get for the effort that you have to put in, because they are a very, very user-friendly tool, and I've certainly fallen in love with using them. You'll see right here I'm beginning to put in the tones for the hand. I decided to go with the Revenge of the Sith hand, as it has always been the one that I've found to be the most interesting. It's also the one that we have the most detailed look at outside of the comics, and finding some reference for Darth Vader cybernetics was a bit tricky, so I did my best with the references I had and ended up with something that I was pretty happy with. But yeah. Alrighty, so thanks for tuning in, guys. I'm glad that we got to wrap that up. I'm super happy with where we are right now. And obviously, at this point, you'll have noticed that there is no background that has been detailed yet. And I did this on purpose. As I was recording through the coloring of the character, I realized that I wanted to dedicate more time to the background, so I felt that that deserved its own episode. Just that way I can really flesh out some of the details of the sky, of the ground, of the ships, some of the buildings in the background and the debris. As I was going through the workload that was there, I felt it important to give it its own video. This won't always be the case with all of my art videos. However, with something like this where it's got a complex background and also where I'm starting out just going from top to bottom on all of my pieces, I felt that it was important to dedicate an entire video to that. So definitely stay tuned for that. That should be up soon. Like I said, I'm in quarantine. I got nothing else to do, so get ready for a lot of art, a lot of cosplay, a lot of cool stuff going to be hitting this channel soon. We're going to be starting out with a bang. But yeah, so super happy with the progress that we made here today. Super looking forward to the progress we're going to make going forward on new projects, old projects that I haven't gotten around to. Just a lot of really exciting stuff coming up here. So I hope you guys are as excited as I am about it. But for now, this is what I got for you. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff that you guys already know about. But yeah, seriously, thanks for tuning in, guys, and see you next time.